Jeff, my brother, tell us all about this legislative session and what transpired or did not transpire. Either way you want to say it and look at it. Share with everybody, if you can, what did take place.
Thanks so much, Scott. First off, I want to say that no fault.
Jeff.
Yeah.
I see you're still at your college dorm room.
Thank you so much. Yes, exactly. Actually, it's a step up, but we won't go there.
I'm kidding. We were teasing you earlier about it, so I just wanted to have a little fun. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Tell what happened.
So anyway, let me say one thing first, Scott. As far as the issue of no-fault divorce is concerned, no-fault divorce is the nice packaged name that we want to give to society. You know, inside the present is a bunch of crap. I'm sorry to put it that bluntly, but we have a nice glittery package so that everybody wants to open it up. Oh, no-fault divorce is so nice. No-fault divorce is not really no-fault divorce. What it should be called is unilateral divorce, forced divorce, divorce on demand. No fault is just the packaging, the marketing gimmick. It is not what actually is being, what actually is going on. So let me just make that perfectly clear at the beginning that it is forced divorce. And what's interesting that I thought is that with the seminar the conference, the webinar that you're having right now, there've been a lot of issues that have been talked about. The abortion issue. You go back to Bolshevik Russia under Vladimir Lenin. Vladimir Lenin imposed unilateral divorce on Bolshevik Russia for the purpose of destroying the family. The Bolsheviks hated the family. They wanted to do it. And there's an article from 1926, The Atlantic magazine, which is not exactly a conservative magazine, but they talked about Russians' efforts to abolish marriage. One of the peasants talked about how, due to the issue of the divorce culture that they now had, abortions cover our village with shame because abortions are the result of unilateral no-fault divorce. Back in Russian society, you had to be married to somebody to have sex with them. So they had people that were marrying, divorcing, stuff like that. And of course, the thing that we kind of forget is that sex sometimes produces children. And they become an inconvenience now, We have these orphan children. What are we going to do with them? Well, maybe if we just abort them first, then we don't have to deal with the consequences of it. But unilateral divorce is what it is. It's one person has the right, the ability, the authority to say that I want out of a marriage, period. And that's it. The marriage is no longer a legally protected institution. There is nothing that actually cements the two together in a legal contract. So all we're saying is this: that there were two bills that were up for debate this session, and the very interesting thing is that last session there were also two bills. One of them, House Bill 93, dealt with the issue of unilateral no-fault divorce, and all that said was, let me go back. That actually passed through committee last time, but Harold Dutton, who was the chair of the committee, he was in conversation with one of the attorneys there, and he said, well, what about if we had mutual no-fault divorce? Would that be okay? So the bill this time actually said mutual no-fault divorce, House Bill 922, and the bill says this. Now, this is really radical, Scott, so buckle up here. On the petition of either party to a marriage, the court may grant a divorce without regard to fault, and here comes the radical language, if both parties to the marriage agree that the marriage has become insupportable because of discord or conflict of personalities that destroys the legitimate ends of the marital relationship and prevents any reasonable expectation of reconciliation. How radical is that? All of this bill would have said is that one person does not get to file for no-fault divorce or unilateral divorce, and therefore the person who responds to the charge, there's no defense. Because one person says, well, I say that it is. An allegation becomes the proof. An accusation becomes the proof. And in many instances, unilateral divorce actually is a cover. I'm out there committing adultery with somebody else. I'm, abandoning my family. But now somehow I need to file for no-fault divorce because I don't want to be blamed for this. It's not my fault. The marriage just broke down somehow. It's a bunch of garbage, but nobody talks about it as it's a bunch of garbage. It is a bunch of garbage. Not only that, but it also violates constitutional rights. So, we've been seeing a lot this past week about President Trump's, last week, about Robert Mueller's testimony against President Trump. And one of the things that they said in particular, they talked about the issue of due process. So the issue of due process is quite important. If a person makes an accusation and that accusation is accepted and the person who's being charged with something has no ability to respond, how does that person have any type of due process? He or she doesn't. In the instance of unilateral divorce, the person who has a divorce filed against him or her has no due process. Now, our Constitution also says that, nobody should be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. What happens in divorce? The person who gets divorce filed against him loses at least 50% of the marital assets, loses everyday access to the children. It is destructive. It is immoral. It is ungodly. It is wicked. It is one of the most unjust things that we have in our society. And the issues that, say, for example, Carol and Bob were talking about, that Emily was talking about earlier, those are offsprings of the main root cause, which is the unilateral no-fault divorce. You have a situation where the most esteemed, what should be the most revered institution has absolutely no protection by law, and this type of social chaos results. Now remember, back under the Bolsheviks, they wanted to do that because by destroying the family, they could impose Leninism or Marxism or communism, whichever one you want to call it. For all intents and purposes, we have that exact same statute in the state of Texas. Now, Mississippi, you mentioned, and I know that you're from Mississippi. Mississippi is one of two states that says, no-fault divorce is a possibility by mutual consent. So Texas doesn't have that. And even though Harold Dutton asked for that to be included last session, we put it in, and now they decided they weren't going to pass this bill. But two people decide to get married together voluntarily. Usually, at least for the most part, you don't have one person with a gun to somebody's head saying, you're going to marry me, and the other person says, okay, it's a forced marriage, I'll take it. But that's what happens with divorce. The one person will say, basically, somewhat figuratively speaking, I've got a gun to your head. This is going to happen. And if you want to contest it, then the family court vultures come in because, they can rub their hands with glee. They're going to make a ton of money off of this. And the more conflict they can create, the more money that they can say that they need for fees. The entire action should be unconstitutional, should be abolished, and yet it's not. And, there are other ramifications for the state later on, whereby the state also profits off of the issue of unilateral no-fault divorce. So that was the first bill. It was so radical that if you want to have no-fault divorce, that both parties of the marriage agree. It's not forced divorce. It's not unilateral divorce. And that bill did not come out of committee this time. It was voted down. Now, there was a second bill, and the second bill was House Bill 926. This was this session's version of House Bill 65 from last session. And all it says is this: if there is a divorce that is going to be granted on the grounds of insupportability, and the interesting thing, Scott, is that nobody knows what insupportability means. Usually when you have some type of statute, you've got to explain your terms, especially a term like insupportability, and especially in Texas where, you have a duty, an obligation to support. What does insupportability mean? We have no idea, but that means it means anything that the person who wants a divorce says it can mean. But then it says here, except as provided by subsection C, the court may not grant a divorce on the grounds of insupportability before the 180th day after the date the suit was filed if the household of one of the spouses is the primary residence for a child under the age of 18, a child 18 years of age who is attending high school, or an adult disabled child as described by section 154.302. So what this bill, we all know, Scott, we all know that divorce impacts children. There is no study, not even one, that says, divorce is good for children. The myth of society is to say, you know what? Children are resilient. Children will be happy if their parents are happy. Children don't mind if their families get split up. They don't mind if they actually have to live with a step parent or never get to see another parent or rarely get to see another parent. It's a bunch of garbage. This idea that somehow children are resilient. It is a lie that we tell ourselves, and it's a lie that we tell ourselves to pacify ourselves so that we think that somehow we are acting in the best interest of the children. The best interest of the children is to be raised in an intact family with his or her natural mother and father, period. In almost every situation. There are some outliers, but that needs to be the standard. This bill would have just said, in a case of insupportability that was filed, that you have to wait 180 days. That is such a, that another thing, it's such a burdensome bill. I mean, this is so radical that we have to wait for 180 days. Can you believe that? So the crazy thing is, Scott, is that already in the Texas Family Code, there are situations in that people may have to wait 3 years to get a divorce or 1 year. That's already in under default-based reasons. So what we have done is said, how are we going to fix this problem? We have a statute that says, well, we don't have to have fault anymore. It just broke apart. I'm not responsible. You're not responsible. It actually encourages the society in which we say, well, nobody's at fault for anything. And you can get a divorce that within 60 days, or at 60 days, after 61 days. But anyway, so that's what happened. What happened is that one actually made it out of committee. Last time it was voted out of committee unanimously. Every Republican, every Democrat, every man, every woman, every person of various ethnicities, every single one of them voted for the passage of this bill. This time it squeaked out. It squeaked out of committee. I don't understand the ungodliness, the wickedness, the injustice that these people, that's the people who vote against it, actually are promoting. They know for a fact that divorce damages children, and yet they will not do anything to protect them. And they claim to be acting in the best interest of the children. So,
Jeff, you and I know this, but a lot of people may not realize this, just how many members of our state legislature are attorneys, and how many of them actually practice family law, if you can call this that.
Right.
So that's something that a lot, because it's if they were to pass some of this, it would hurt their pocketbook possibly.
So, Scott, you bring up a very interesting point here, because why, and follow me on this, just give me a moment with it. But, we have the three powers, the three branches of government. We have the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. And there's supposed to be a separation of powers there. The question that I have is, when you have attorneys who are going into the legislature, writing laws where they will, in the future, profit by these laws, some of these people will leave the legislature. Now, they've authored these bills, these attorneys, and they're there as a consultant. They are padding their futures down the road. The Texas Family Law Foundation has attorneys in place that they call upon. The Texas Family Law Foundation is a lobbying group. There was a testimony in February of 2017. The president, Joelle Cannon Sheridan, stated that the thing that she was most proud of in her position was being a lobbyist for the Texas State Family Bar. That was what she was really proud of. And yet, in the state of Texas, people are these people, these lobbyists, are given special privileges. This past session, I was watching one of Chairman Dutton leading the group and saying, well, you need to get together with Texas Family Law Foundation about the details of these bills. The Attorney General's office had a person up there, and they said, well, we can contact the Texas Family Law Foundation. They are a lobbying group. They are a lobbying group, and they are legislators who are actually they are attorneys, as you mentioned, who would be more part of the judicial system, who are infiltrating the legislature, and they're destroying our country. Now, I look at the family law attorneys, and I'm not going to say all of them. Some of them don't know what's going on, but some of them are the Jack Kevorkians of families. They are the people that are destroying families, and they're profiting by it. And they're using Jack Kevorkian excuses. Well, they're euthanizing people, or they're destroying people, and they're destroying children. And the hypocrisy of the whole thing is that then they claim to be acting in the best interest of the children. Anyway, I've kind of digressed a little bit there. But, constitutional violations, you look at the contract clause in Article 1. If you have a marital contract, the government is not supposed to impair the obligation of contracts. That was decided back in the 1800s. There was a case that went to court, and the government is not allowed to impair the obligation of contracts. That's written in our Constitution. The issue of the due process and equal protection under law. How is a person who is a respondent to a unilateral, forced, no-fault divorce, we have to call it no-fault for the packaging to make it acceptable to people. How is a person who has no defense, the respondent loses 100% of the time, how does he or she have equal protection under the law? He or she does not. It is a direct violation of the 14th Amendment. You have the idea of religious liberty, and we've talked about religious liberty. People who get married in the church, they are taking a vow before God. If you're a Catholic, it is a sacrament. If you're a Protestant, it's an institution. We say, we need to have separation of church and state, except for marriage. Marriage is the one institution that the state thinks it can intrude into and destroy that institution. We don't have the state coming in and administering communion. We don't have the state coming in and praying for the sick. We don't have the state doing a lot of these other sacraments or ordinances of the church, except for marriage. So two people take a vow before God. It is a religious commitment, and the state is impairing that religious commitment. It is a religious liberty violation. We look at issues like spending. When Bob and Carol were talking about education, when Emily was talking about, let me just stick with the education part of it there. Shelby Sharp made the argument, I believe it was the last session, not this session, but the last session, in which he talked about the rise of the remedial classes and how they basically didn't exist prior to the issue of no-fault divorce. Why is that? Because kids are being impacted negatively, and it's destroying their education. There is a correlation between children of divorce and them between children of divorce and them either dropping out of school or not going to college, not achieving the economic success that many of their peers have. And it's not saying in every situation that is the case, but statistically speaking, that is the case. So our government in the state of Texas, basically, like it or not, they have declared war on the family. And they'll tell you how pro-family they are. It's a bunch of nonsense. It's lying. They're not telling you the truth. They are responsible for this. We have legislators who could fix this, and the legislature has been weak-kneed. We had 2 more attempts, and they were 2 more swings and misses, and you're out, struck out once again. Now, we're going to continue to go on, and one of the things that we're looking at is how to do this for next session. So we've got some things in mind. We're going to be exhibiting at the Values Voter Summit this upcoming October in DC. We couldn't get things together in time. That is on the agenda for the future. One of the things we need to do, I think, also is get the churches involved. The churches need to be to see just how bad this is and how this is an infringement on their religious liberty. A couple of years ago, we had the Houston pastors who protested over the fact that their sermons were being requisitioned by the Houston mayor because they were speaking against same-sex marriage. The church is already yielded on the fact that the state comes in and destroys the ordinance of the church. We need to go back to the main cause. And because we aren't addressing the main cause, we have all of these other things that we're addressing. Anyway, you've given me a lot of time to speak here. I appreciate it. If you want to ask any questions, feel free to, but I try to make it as concise as I could. I could go a lot further on this.
I know you could, brother, and I appreciate so much your valuable time that you've been here. Most people will not know this, but you've been on here before 7. And
yeah.
So he's watched the entire discussion with everybody, and it's going to take a concerted effort, because all of these organizations that we have been speaking with tonight and individuals like Jeff, what we have got to come to realize is that the duopoly party known as Republicans and Democrats, have their own agenda. And it is high time, and I know we're running a little bit over past 9 here, but there's some things that need to be said. The Constitution Party of Texas this past year and a half ago made no-fault divorce, so-called no-fault divorce, a #1 issue of our legislative agenda. We did everything that we could from our respective places in order to strive to put pressure on legislators this session to try to aid Jeff and other ones that were able to go to Austin in our place and be a part of pushing for new legislation to eliminate this stuff.